Okay, good morning Year 10. I hope you are managing at home okay. Remember to message me if there are any problems or issues concerning your schoolwork and history. So today is your double history lesson for period 1 and 2. There are only 3 lessons to go until we're back face to face, and only one after these videos, so we're nearly there. Before we begin, a reminder as to the 5 steps of successful home learning. Number 1, find somewhere quiet to watch this video. Number 2, sit at a desk or a table. Number 3, turn off all distractions. Number 4, have a pen and your old history exercise book or lined paper to hand. And number 5, always remember you can pause this video and repeat it whenever you need. There will also be a Teams online quiz at the end of these 2 videos so I can gauge how everyone is responding to the work, so please make sure you complete that. So let's jump into lesson 2 of the Whitechapel booklet. What was the local context of Whitechapel in the 19th century? So similarly to last time, I would like you to just pause the video here and write the title and date in your exercise book or paper. So our first activity of today looks at this map of Whitechapel. It's from Charles Booth, who we encountered last time, and is an inquiry into life and labour in London in between 1886 and 1903. That's basically a fancy way of saying that the map identifies areas of poorer housing and richer housing. What I would like you to do is spend 60 seconds just looking at this map, and then in your book identify at least 2 things you can draw out from the source. For example, have a think, where did the richer people live? Next to what road? Etc. Pause the video and have a go at this now. Your next task is just to read this passage here. This passage here, from living conditions down to appearance. Sanitation, quickly, basically relates to drinking water and sewage. Okay, so this passage is on living conditions, pollution and sanitation. Give yourself 60 seconds to read this passage. Go. So the Victorian age, I should say, was renowned for its pollution. So what we know is that the winds in England often blow east off the Atlantic, and so blow the pollution over East London instead of West London. This is why historically East London, and with places like Whitechapel, are often poorer than West London, their West London counterparts. What I would like you to do now is to identify 2 of the most important details in this passage, and then summarise the conditions into 30 words and 1 image. Give yourself roughly maybe 5 minutes to do that now. Pause the video. So next we come to this source. This is from the social reformer Henrietta Barnett, and her kind of piece, her prose I should say, East London 1888, a year in a London borough among the labouring poor. It states, none of these courts had roads. In some the houses were 3 stories high and hardly 6 feet apart, the sanitary accommodation being pits in the cellars. So their toilets were pits in the cellars. In other courts, the houses were lower, wooden and dilapidated. So that's my word from last week, from last lesson I should say. Basically means run down. A standpipe at the end providing the only water. Each chamber was the home of a family who sometimes owned their indescribable furniture. In many instances, broken windows had been repaired with paper and rags. The banisters had been used for firewood, and the paper hung from the walls, which were the residence of countless vermin. Have a think about those words. Does it sound safe to live in? If you lived there, how do you think your health would be affected? So just pause the video now and explain your thoughts to these questions in your book. Reading something like this evokes strong emotions, but can we trust this source? So remember, Whitechapel is actually a source-based exam, and so when we read or see sources, we need to think about where they came from. For example, if you read a Trump tweet, would you believe it? Probably not. As historians, we need to look beyond the words at the purpose. This source is written by a social reformer, Henrietta Barnett. As a social reformer, she wants to improve conditions, so she might play upon or exaggerate the conditions to make them sound worse. So therefore, can we trust her? Maybe, maybe not. I'll leave you to answer that. This leads us on to housing in Whitechapel. So we know from what we've read that the housing was awful, but what we are coming to learn is what the different types of housing there were. So what I would like you to now do is please pause the video and read the first these two paragraphs of this section on housing in Whitechapel and the differences between rookeries and lodging houses. Once again, I'm going to draw on the work from Hallie Rubenhold and her book The Five to really kind of describe the terror of these places. So Hallie Rubenhold states, the lodging houses provided temporary homes for the homeless, who divided their nights between the reeking beds on offer here, the oppression of the workhouse casual wards, and sleeping on the street. They were the haunts of beggars, criminals, prostitutes, chronic alcoholics, the unemployed, the sick and old, the casual labourer and the pensioned soldier. Naturally, those on Dorset Street, Thrall Street and Flower and Dean Street bore the worst reputations. 4p per night could buy someone a single, hard, flea-hopping bed in a stifling, stinking dormitory. All lodgers were entitled to make sure of their communal kitchen, which was open all day and late into the night. Residents used this as a gathering place, cooking meagre meals and quaffing tea and beer with one another. Social investigators and reformers who sat at these kitchen tables were appalled by the grotesque manners and the horrific language they heard, even from the children. However, it was the violent behaviour, degrading filth and overflowing toilets, in addition to the open displays of nakedness, free sexual intercourse, drunkenness and child neglect, to which they truly objected. That is why I like kind of repeating Hallie Rubenhold's passages, because they're so descriptive. You get a real taste for what it was like living in Whitechapel in the late 1800s. What I would like you to do now is just pause the video and highlight 3 things from that passage that stand out. When you have done that, just pause the video again and absorb the image of Dorset Street. So this is Dorset Street to which Rubenhold is describing. So she mentions it up here. Dorset Street in Whitechapel in the 1880s. You get a sense of the pollution in the background, the kind of overbearing houses on either side, and all these people on the kind of in the alleys and on the streets. So just pause the video now and complete those 2 tasks. What I would then like you to do is again just pause the video and read these 2 paragraphs on essentially the Peabody estate. Pause the video now. Again, I'm going to kind of refer back to Rubenhold and the comparison between Peabody Estate and what we've just read on the lodging houses and rookeries. Rubenhold states, as Peabody's aim was to promote the health, happiness and moral well-being of the working classes, he intended that his tenements should offer accommodation superior to anything otherwise available to the labouring population. Unlike the mouldering ceilings and verminous interiors of most artisan housing, the Peabody buildings were built from brick, with boarded floors and cement white walls. At Stamford Street, the four-storey blocks consisting of gas-lit apartments were arranged around a courtyard and boasted of modern conveniences. With a central room designated for cooking, eating and living, family members could then enjoy a degree of privacy afforded by separate bedrooms. Think of how this compares to what we've previously read. Just pause the video now and answer this question in your exercise book. Your next task is a little bit longer. Is to copy this table out in your exercise book and fill it in. So you will need at least half a page of paper for this. So pause the video now and just copy out the table. Once you have done that, I want you to then use the information from what we have just read and what you have read in this video and rewind to the relevant passages and fill the table in with the information. I want you to be as detailed as you can, even using quotes from Rubenhold to bolster your points. So this task should take between 8 and 12 minutes. So be detailed and take your time. Your time starts now. Finally, and similarly to the end of our first lesson, I want you to complete a 4-mark GCSE exam question. This time, again, we know it begins with describe 2 features of, but this time it is talking about accommodation for the poorer people in Whitechapel. So remember, you need 1 feature and then 1 piece of supporting evidence. So you can talk about rookeries and how they are overcrowding slums. You can talk about lodging houses. You can talk about the Peabody estate. Just pause the video now and answer this 4-mark question. When you have completed this, please see the next video for the second lesson of your double period. Many thanks, Mr. Chewson.